Previously on Pull It Off, we had floor, we had walls, we had a roof, we had not much else actually. But hey, Rome wasn't built in a day, and neither was this office. Now going forwards, we know there's going to be mistakes.
Not good.
There's one problem. But that's okay, because on this channel we have a catchphrase. Don't ask yourself if you can, ask yourself how you can. So, let's get started. Have you seen my tape measure? Now whenever you're doing work like this, there are two things that always go missing: the pencils and the tape measure. Now there is only two valid ways that you can deal with this issue. The first one is buy 50 pencils, 50 tape measures, and you'll always have one handy. The second is to accidentally film yourself in slow motion, and when you can't find it, play the video back and find out where it went. I spent 10 minutes looking for it before I decided to review the footage. After retrieving my tape measure, I decided to continue with the arduous job of cutting the insulating panels and fitting them in the office. It takes a long time, it's very repetitive, it's very boring, and where at the beginning I hadn't spaced out the spaces continuously, I had to measure every single space and cut to each one. Now luckily for me at the time, I was reading a book called Atomic Habits by James Clear, and in here he helps you get into some good habits. And one of the things he recommends is if you've got a boring job, set yourself a small target, and then once you've started doing it, you might just carry on. And that's exactly what I did here. Every day I would set myself a target of putting in 6 blocks, and I often found that after I'd done 6 blocks, I usually had the energy to continue, and in the rare occasion where I didn't, I would just stop and I still had a productive day. It also makes it easier to return to the job the next day because you're a little further ahead. There are also tons of other little tricks in this book that I use on a day-to-day basis. I highly recommend. But after all this boredom, perhaps luckily for me, it was about to be interrupted with a problem. You see, when I ordered the wood and there was a mix-up, they ended up delivering some wood that was 97mm thick and some wood that was 100mm thick. Now at the time, I didn't see the issue in the 3mm until you realise the walls and the ceilings are slightly misaligned. When you go to put plasterboard on that, the 3mm is going to make a difference. So I borrowed a planer from work and I spent a few hours making all the wood flush. Once that was done, I was ready to carry on installing the insulation foam, so I decided to move on to a new job. And this is the job here. Now, if you remember from my last video, the end of the office was going to be my girlfriend's area, and as you can see, I've left no space here. That was because it's not important. And this brings me on to my next top tip for motivation. If you come across a job you can't be bothered to do, find a job that's even worse, such as cutting foam insulation and installing it, and then doing the boring job like cutting out a piece of wood and building a shelf for inside seems a lot more attractive, and you can use the new job to replace the old job. Now this motivation tip I didn't find in any book, I worked it out myself. And the great thing about this tip is you can also use it to avoid social situations your partner has booked in. Sorry, I can't go out with your family tonight because I've got my shed to do. And before you know it, the job will be finished, and possibly so will your relationship. And before I knew it, I was back to cutting insulation board again. At this point I think even the camera was getting bored and was slowly turning away as I was trying to film. And once the walls were insulated, I looked at the ceiling and decided to work outside. Now when I started this project, it never occurred to me I might need to wrap the building. Apparently it's something we need to do. This is a breathable membrane. What it will do is keep the moisture out and stop the wood getting too wet. So long term this should stop the wood rotting. Now after the price of materials has shot up, this is another hidden expense I wasn't expecting. However, when I spoke to my manager at work, he was about to chuck away some roofing membrane. And when I researched this further, it's perfectly okay to put roofing membrane on the walls, but you cannot put wall membrane on the roof because the roofing membrane is higher quality. So it worked out better in the end, and I do like free things. However, all my happiness was about to change because I ran into a huge problem. Now whenever you're building something like this, you'll always have people come around, see what you're doing, and share their opinion with you. And when my girlfriend's sister came around, she spotted something wrong with the roof. Can you see what it is? Because even when I was building it, I was completely oblivious to this. Now I don't know how she knew this, but it turns out whenever you're insulating a ceiling, you need to make sure there's room for ventilation. To get the airflow, you need to make sure that there's a 40mm gap between the foam and the wooden panel. But to get the air flowing, the 40mm gap also needs to be on every single noggin. So for me, the obvious solution here, although it isn't perfect, would be to swap out the 5x2 for 4x2. But when I tried taking the noggins out, I could only unscrew 3 out of the 27 of them. This was because when I put the roof on, we screwed downwards because I was doing it from above. But now the roof's in place with the rubber on top, there is no way I can get these screws out. So the only other thing I could think of doing was drilling through the wood. This was a really horrible job. It was really uncomfortable. I probably put 50 holes in each noggin and there is 24 noggins to do. My arms ached from trying to use the drill above shoulder height. I kept hitting my head on the ceiling, I had sawdust falling in my face, and when I got to the edge of the noggin, you would often hit a screw and it would start blunting the drill bit. However, if I didn't make sure there was some airflow, I'd probably have to redo the whole roof in about 4 years. So spending about 5 hours correcting this, although at the time it didn't seem like a great deal, in the end, I'm really glad I did it. And this is what it looks like now. Now, this looks absolutely awful and terrible, but it should allow enough airflow to stop the wood rotting, and by the time it's finished, this is all going to be hidden above the ceiling. Now, as a YouTuber, I could just hide this and pretend it never happened, but I feel if I'm encouraging people to try new things, it's important to show that things go wrong, and that when they do, you do your best to rectify them. And that's exactly what I've done here. And as you can probably guess, doing a project over a couple of years, there's some more coming up later in the video where I make further mistakes. After all, in any project, there's always 3 kinds of ideas. Good ideas, bad ideas, and stupid ideas. The good ideas, well obviously, they make sense and you have a good outcome. The bad ideas, they can take a long time, they can be fiddly and awkward, but in the end, there's still a good chance you'll get an okay result. And then there's the stupid ideas. These are ones that were doomed from the start, and at best you'll end up with a bit of a mess and have to restart. At worst, you can hurt yourself. The only thing is, you can never be 100% sure of what kind of idea it is until you've started it. Take this idea for example. I decided to try to install these doors by myself. It took 4 of us to get these double glazed doors off the van and into the garden, and rather than try to make friends or pay someone to help me, I decided to try to put these heavy, fragile glass doors in by myself. So, quiz time. Do you think this was a good idea, a bad idea, or a stupid idea? At the time, I personally thought it was a bad idea, possibly bordering on a stupid idea. But there's only one way to find out. So I decided to roll, twist, wiggle and lever these doors into position. And to my surprise, I actually managed to get them in place. Now it didn't all go completely to plan. When the doors were open, they tended to want to lean forwards, and there was one point where I actually dropped them. But luckily for me, the doors just hit the grass and I managed to get them back into position so quickly, you can't actually see the mistake on the footage. So overall, I would personally say it was a bad idea, but I've still got a good result, and I can crack on with the rest of the project. Now personally, I would argue the only thing worse than a bad idea or a stupid idea is having no idea at all. Because even if you do something stupid and you mess up the project, you've still learnt from that mistake, and when you try again, you can only do better. Just make sure you don't hurt yourself or anyone else. So now it's time for Tool of the Month, the weird angle finder thingy. I can literally just wedge that in like that, tighten this bit here, again, really hard to do with one hand. I can take it out, line it up along the wood, and then get the exact cut I need. That's too long! You didn't see anything. Let's try it again. Oh, there we go. Nice and flush at the top. We've got that angle pretty good there. And I used the exact same method to fit that beam there as well. Highly recommend the weird angle finder thing. I just realised I actually wanted it that way around. So it seems like a long time ago I was out here in the sun doing this topless. However, it's a bit chillier now.
There's just frost everywhere. I would, however, really like to get this window into that hole, but there is one problem. There we go. That's my measuring skills right there. I'm finding it very hard to get the motivation to do the boring jobs. The end doesn't seem anywhere near in sight, so I've just got to break it down, do one step by one step. So today I've set myself the task of making the hole big enough to put the window in, and then usually once I've started I'll have the motivation to actually put the window in, but for today the target is to make the hole the right size.
Now, when I look back at this footage, the task at hand is actually not that hard at all. All I had to do was move down a little batten. But I had a lot going on at the time. I'm not very good with the cold, I don't like it when there's no blue sky, and I've just been making little mistakes and really feeling like I just wasn't getting anywhere. So by setting myself a small target and hitting that target, I felt like I'd accomplished something, and it gave me the motivation to carry on and actually get the window in place. So I managed to successfully trick myself into getting the job done. And that's got me thinking, am I clever for outsmarting myself? Or stupid for falling for my own trick? So now it's time to run the electrics. Now luckily for me, I've got a friend who's an electrician. Unluckily for me, he's not a really good friend that's just going to do the whole thing for me. No, but joking aside, I am terrible at electrics, so he's given me very simple instructions. He's shown me the difference between the thick wires and the thin wires, and he's drawn me a diagram of how I need to run them. So I'm doing my best at running the lights on the thin wires, all the sockets and the heaters on the thicker wires, and I've run a huge thick wire around the back and the outside of the house, which is going to go into the fuse board. He also suggested running a wire into my secret trap door. I don't know what I'm going to use it for, but I agreed that having electrics in there could be useful. So here's something really weird. When I was putting up this mesh, I knew it wasn't a good idea, but I didn't realise quite how stupid I was until I watched the video back. I mean, what could possibly go wrong? But still, I managed to get the mesh up, and this will make sure I've still got airflow going through the roof without letting any birds or insects nest inside it. And then next was back on the insulation foam again. And the good news is, I actually did it this fast. I was so excited about getting it done that I just absolutely smashed through this job. So, here's an idea that I thought was a good idea, but actually turned out to be a bad idea. See, I was about to put the plasterboard on the ceiling, and I had to know exactly where to cut to bring the wires from the lights through the plasterboard. So what I decided to do was put a laser level on the floor, shine it at the ceiling so the cross was where the wires had to come through, and then mark the edges on the wall. So that way, when I put the plasterboard up, all I had to do was line the lasers up with a mark on the wall, and I know exactly where to cut. It also meant that the 6 spotlights that were going on the ceiling would all be perfectly aligned. So why was this a bad idea? And the reason for this was every time I tried moving the laser and tried to line up the lines with the marks on the wall, it was very fiddly and took a very long time to do. I feel like if I'd used the laser to get the line in place and then just measure the distance, I would have got equal results, but in far less time. And now, here's an example of a stupid idea. It turns out it's particularly difficult to put plasterboard on the ceiling by yourself. What I decided to do was get a piece of wood, screw it so there was a small space between that and the roof, so I could slide the plasterboard into the slot I made, and that was going to hold one end of the plasterboard, and then I could hold the other end of the plasterboard up, and then screw one screw in place on each corner to hold it in place, whilst I put the rest in. And here you can see where the corner of the plasterboard failed and smashed to the ground. And this is when I decided to ask somebody for help. Now I didn't film this bit because it wasn't planned, they just came round and I kind of dragged them into the office and asked them to help me screw it into place. And here you can see how long it took me to get the laser dot in the right place. This is a time lapse at 3 times speed. It's crazy how long I spent doing this. The technique did work though, because they were all in the exact right spot. After this, I felt like I was on the home straight. It's just a case of putting all the plasterboard up, getting it plastered and painting it, and then it will be semi-inhabitable. Oh, and I need to get the electrics connected.
So I have just gone through a wire which just there. That is not good. I don't know how bad it is yet. So either find a way to repair that wire, or I take them out, because I don't want to take off all the plasterboard.
So I WhatsApped my electrician to see if he could fix it, and he can. So not that big a deal. Time to clean up and carry on. So I've been working on this video for a long time now.
It's been 84 years.
And I didn't really know how I was going to make the video work. And to make it work, I found it easier to not post the clips in the right order. So you may notice this now.
Okay, so today I'm going to be plastering the shed. Now I didn't buy any new plaster, I'm just going to use these old plasters I've got here. Now ideally you want to use something new because these might go off a bit quick. But as you can see, I need to do the walls and the ceilings. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to chuck these in.
And the room is plastered. Okay, so confession time. I didn't do this myself, I got a professional in. Now a lot of people told me I wouldn't be able to plaster very well the first time I tried, which made me want to do it all the more. But my girlfriend wanted the patio done outside, and to make sure I didn't get plaster all over the patio, we decided to get it done quicker and to get someone in to do it. So I really would have loved to have given it a go, and maybe I'll get an opportunity next time. But hey, it looks good, I'm happy with the outcome. So again, we can just carry on. Now, I have done a lot of painting in my life, but what I've never done is painted onto dry plaster. But luckily for me, I bumped into a professional painter, and he told me the first time you paint onto dry plaster, you water the paint down, so it's 50-50 paint on water, and you do that for the first coat. If you don't do that, you're going to have a hard time getting the paint to stick to the wall.
Okay, so this is it after the first layer of paint. I'm actually quite surprised how well that covered the wall. It's the next day, time to do the next coat.
So now we've got to this stage, it's really time to start thinking about what I want the room to look like. In my head, I want it to look really natural, I want to have lots of live edge wood, and I also intend on having some rock effect in there. And I know it's not going to be easy, but I'm also hoping I can make it look quite rustic and modern at the same time. And to help accomplish that, I think it's going to have a lot to do with the lighting and the way I use the features. Now, going with a natural look, green is the first one that jumps to mind, and actually I find it a relaxing colour, so I think it'll be a great colour to incorporate on the walls. However, I think it will be too much to have it on every wall, so what I've decided to do is have a solid green walls for 4 out of the 6 walls, and for the back wall that's going to have a desk running along it, I'm going to have white above the desk and green below it. I don't know if that's a good idea, but I won't find out unless I try. So I had a very specific kind of green in mind. I wanted it to be a warm green, so slightly yellowy, and I wanted it to be quite light. I actually had one mixed up for me to the shades and the colours that I wanted. And then I started putting it on the wall. And then I stood back and looked at it, and I really wasn't sure on the colour. And here you can see my sister walk in, and her first comment was, "Wow, that's very green." Which I knew I could translate as, "That looks disgusting." And actually, I did agree with that to some extent. But I do believe that once I've got it done and I've got all the features in, it will come together quite seamlessly and the walls won't be so prominent. At least, that's what I'm hoping. So, at this point, I felt for the inside of the office this was a good place to end the video. However, I forgot to take a video of what it actually looked like. So, what I've decided to do is show you what it looks like now with a few more of the projects completed. So this is going to be a separate video. It's the desk that took me 3 months to build and the one I accidentally set light to the inside of the office with. I then spent a fair amount of time laying a floor, and then I added this electric heater fireplace, which ironically I didn't set a light to anything with, but I did nearly cut off my thumb. So these are going to be in a video that I might not have put out yet, because although they're usable, I still haven't completely finished them. But as it stands, this is what it looks like now. Which then brings us to the outside of the building. So for me, this was pretty straightforward. I've just used some live edge red cedar, and I've started cladding the building in it. Now, when I first started this project, I didn't really know what I was getting myself into. I knew that I'd have to learn a lot, and usually if I do a project, I want to step a little outside my comfort zone. But this whole project was a lot different from any I'd ever done before. I really didn't think it would take this long. I've easily spent 1,000 hours on this project, and that doesn't even include the time I spent researching and looking into things I didn't know. But whilst doing this project, I've learnt a lot of different things about creating a building. Everything from the electrics to the foundations, and also the materials used, and the skills required. But it's not just the practical skills of building a building, I've learnt a lot about myself as well. Doing a project that's taken so long has really pushed me to my limits. I always wanted to make sure I was making progress, but I really didn't want to rush things. Because for me, this project wasn't just about having an office. It was about pushing myself to the limit and seeing what I was capable of. So whilst doing it, I've learnt a lot about myself, ways I can motivate myself, and knowing when I can carry on and when I need to stop. And I'm going to need those skills because going on, I've got more ideas, I've got more plans, and I've got dreams that I want to accomplish. If you want to see what they are, or even better, help me along the way, I'll drop a link below to my website which will explain everything. But a really quick and easy thing you can do right now if you want to is hit that subscribe button and leave a comment, because it really helps to know there's people out there that are getting something from this content. I really hope that if you're watching this, it's inspired you to do something that you really want to do, and if it has, let me know. It would genuinely mean so much to me to know this has inspired other people to start their projects. And if there's one thing to take away from this video, it's don't ask yourself if you can, ask yourself how you can.